Hello and welcome to the Gentleman Project Podcast. I'm Cory Moore.
And I'm Kirk Chugg. Ernie has been a good friend of mine for quite a while. He was one of the early adopters of the daily doodad texts. We would talk about those all the time. He is a branding expert, but he's also a very, very purposeful father. And I've watched him very active on social media, very active with his kids, be very deliberate in the way that he lives his life. And Ernie has been the brains of many brands that you know and has been integral in making those brands purposeful. And he's taken that same purposeful effort and put it into his life. And so he lives his life the way that he teaches his clients to brand themselves. And so I'm excited to have Ernie on the podcast today to talk about how to be a gentleman, how to teach your kids how to be great people, and how to pass on great traits and virtues to your kids. So welcome, Ernie, this morning. We're super happy to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit first about your family dynamic and makeup, and a little bit about what you do.
I think everybody kind of starts with their own childhood. That's kind of where their family starts. And so I've got 8 brothers.
Oh, wow.
No sisters. And so you can
This
just
is
imagine,
all the family dynamic you need to know.
Exactly. Yeah, you just know this was a train wreck.
And where do you fit in there?
I'm right in the middle.
In the middle.
So I've got an identical twin brother, and he is one of 4 older than me. So he's 16 minutes older than me.
16 minutes?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's huge.
That's huge
a
for
big time
twins.
frame, yeah.
And
I have
then
twins and they're like 30 seconds apart, and one of them's like, I'm older.
Maybe they just forgot about me. I was like, wait, there's another one.
There's another one in there.
And then I've got 4 younger. And we were raised kind of in a rural area. We moved quite a bit. I think I went to 4 elementary schools. So that required me to kind of develop the ability to develop relationships, to make friends and stuff, because you're always changing. I have 4 kids ranging from 25 to 12, 3 girls and a little boy. Married
Ernie
young.
looks about 25, so that's
Whatever.
like, holy crap, man.
I've got married young. I was 22. My wife was 18. Didn't have to get married.
Back in the olden days, that's where they did
I know,
things.
yeah.
You guys just fell in love. You couldn't help yourself, is what I'm hearing.
Totally. And I am more nuts about her today than I have ever been.
I have to tell you, I love that.
Dude, she is a freaking rock. She's a supermodel. She's like next level supermodel. And her life, it seems, is to try to make me happy. Like seriously, like I'm downstairs. I work downstairs in my home. She'll bring me like cheese and crackers and a Diet Coke that's got ice in it. You know what I mean?
Just the way you like it.
I mean, that's everything a man needs.
Exactly. Exactly. No, but we found early on in our marriage that we need to kind of focus on the other person. When we do that, man, things are so much better. Instead of kind of like trying to find my own happiness, she's able to make me happier than I'm able to make myself. And I think vice versa is true. So I'm constantly telling her how gorgeous she is and how just amazing she is and stuff. And those kinds of words of affirmation are really powerful for her. That's kind of her love language. And for me, it's like snacks.
Yeah. Acts of service via snacks.
Right.
I like that.
So yeah,
into a man's heart through his stomach, right?
But don't you think the amazing marriage is a part of showing your kids what it means to be a gentleman? I mean,
yeah,
I think that's a huge part, and we don't always talk about that on the podcast. So
we model that to our kids. We do it subconsciously. We have no idea how impactful the way we treat our spouse
totally
is. Because one of the things I want to make sure happens too is like, I've got 3 girls. I want them to marry somebody who treats them better than I treat their mom. Because my girls are like, let's face it, nobody can measure up.
No,
I cannot, like, even I've got my oldest daughter is married and he is awesome. But I'm like, it's an impossible standard. Right?
Good luck. You might be perfect, but he won't be perfect.
Are you a Disney prince? Yes, I don't care.
That's right. That's right. But I started my career as an illustrator. I went to school as an illustrator. I wanted to be an artist. I thought it'd be cool to work for Disney or something like that. And then I got hired at an ad agency to do storyboards and comps or mock-ups, basically sketch out whatever a creative director and art director had in mind.
Right.
I did that and it was really a fun job, and I was really good at it. 2 years later, I left, started my own company. This is in 1995, and I've been doing that ever since. Illustration turned into design, which kind of then I added radio and TV and stuff like that. So I became a creative production professional. And then that kind of led into brand development. One of my early clients in brand development was Maverick. And I had a fantastic team. We were asked to rebrand a cowboy western.
Yeah, it's a country store.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's what it's called. Maverick Country Stores.
So anybody that's outside the state of Utah or the Intermountain West may not know what Maverick is, but it is like the premier gas station convenience store, Adventure's first stop, right?
Yeah, now it's Adventure's first stop, and a team of people, me and a team of guys came up with this adventure theme, and we had like a guy named Brad Call, who was like an owner of Maverick, and he was the marketing director as well as chief legal counsel, like he was everything. But he's the one that kind of put the gasoline on that flame and helped Maverick become this really great brand. Now it's a great brand story. I've developed other brands. I wrote a book called Your Brand Sucks.
Your Brand Sucks
that
is
kind
a
of outlines
book.
The process I use to do that.
That sounds cool.
Dude, you can do it in 2 hours.
It's so good.
So
it's so good.
Well, thanks, Kirk.
It's like he gets inside your head. And if you've ever started a company and tried to brand it, like, I've got to get a logo. I need my colors. Like, that's the last thing you do. Yeah. And he walks you through the whole thing about what does your brand say? What does it stand for? What do people feel when they walk in, when they interact with your brand? It's so good. Thanks, so Kirk. Grab it. Like I'm an advocate for it. Like anytime it comes up on social media, LinkedIn or anything like that, I'm like, oh, Your Brand Sucks is the best. And I tag Ernie.
That's awesome. Because
it is so good. And it's just like, he gets inside your head and it's short. Right? It's not like a 400-page book.
Well, it started as like a 400-page book, and then I had an editor take a look at it and basically redlined it, and I thought I was about done. 6 months later, I get it reviewed again, and the editor said, you have way too many examples for each principle. And what I thought was interesting was like, what do you mean? Isn't more better? And he said, it sounds like you're desperate to prove your point by putting too many examples of the same principle in there. Do one really good example and then move on. And what I liked about how the book ended up was it is no fat. It is all meat. So you just go right through it and everything is like hits 1, 2, 3.
That's exactly what I was trying to say.
I love books like that though.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't like the 20 examples. Like I get it. Let's move on, Well,
then I
think that's smart.
You'll like it.
So talk to us about how this idea of branding, because I know you had to have thought of this, like this idea of branding and experience and the things that you're teaching your clients. How are you thinking about that in the family life and how, your experience of your family, like you mentioned before the podcast started, these daddy-daughter date nights, which I love. And my daughters are going to listen to this podcast and be like, Dad, you need to step it up.
Right.
We're not doing that very often. So talk to us about just, some things you're doing with your family and is branding affect that at all?
I think branding is, the way I approach branding is through a strategy. What do I want the end to be? I think most of us humans, we are drawn with the current of life. Whatever opportunities present themselves, we just follow those opportunities instead of being choiceful about where we want to be. And I think the same thing as a parent.
Totally.
Right? And so I was reading this. So branding is about like, who are you as a company? What is the personality? And then how do you deliberately create an experience, visual, like logos, colors, textures, patterns. In construction, Cory, surfaces convey a tremendous amount about the personality of the company. So when you use woods and tan and warm colors and stuff like that, it's very natural. It's very comfortable. If you use steel and glass and chrome, it is contemporary and it's cold, it's sterile, but it's professional and elegant. So there's different personalities, and each of those personalities can be represented through the appropriate language of that. Colors, textures, patterns, and things like that. And so if we know who we are, then we can choose or curate the right visual and verbal language to express it that's authentic. So I did the same thing with, I don't know, I'm just kind of wired that way. I hate the idea of just being like ending up where I'm ending up. And I want to be where I want to be. Mm-hmm. And so when Kiara, my oldest, was like 1, I was reading a newspaper about young women who have a whole bunch of problems, like drug problems, depression problems, child out of wedlock problems, and all these things are real major hardships for these young women. And they said that young women who have good relationships with their fathers are less likely to exponentially to experience these problems. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can do something about this. I can influence this. And at the time, I was serving as a congregational leader in my church, my faith. And every Wednesday night was like taken, like 3-4 hours a night or a week. And when I was released from that calling, I used that time to do daddy-daughter date nights so I could build relationships with them. And honestly, you guys, it felt like a train wreck at first. We were going to Carl's Jr. for chicken stars. And I would sit there watching my kids just play on the playground. And they would come, they'd run back and bite another little star wedge off, and then they'd go back to playing. Most of my dates were kind of like that, where we weren't having deep conversations or like, I just want to connect with you. It was just basically spend time with the daughter. And I did that for years. And I don't know if it worked. I don't know. I don't know what it would have been like without it, but my kids are pretty good.
They have a good relationship with their dad.
You know what? I bet if you asked them, I bet it was more impactful than you realize.
Well, I just know that I had to do something deliberately.
Yeah.
I had to do something that made a difference. Now, I didn't do that with my son. There was like a 7-year gap between my youngest daughter and my son. And I kind of got off. I was like working too much. I was focused on career and stuff. But I spent a lot of time with him because he was the only kid, So I spent quality time with him, but in a different way. So.
And that's why I got involved in the Gentleman Project in the first place. And I still wish I was more purposeful. I still wish I was more deliberate. But I think most parents, they do their best and they try to teach hard work and integrity. But they're doing it in that stream you talked about, right?
Yeah.
We're just going to go down this stream. And as we go through life and as we just happen to live our family life together, I'm going to do my best to teach you things. And Kirk, when I heard about the Gentleman Project, the whole idea that he had was, I'm going to teach my kids in a journal one true north principle at a time. And I'm going to purposefully teach them what I believe. That was where the Gentleman Project was born. And I heard that and I thought, that's amazing. Why am I not doing something so purposeful, And that's kind of how this whole thing was born. And so to your point, we're really trying to inspire parents in the podcast it doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be hard, create one new habit, that's purposeful with your kids. It could be daddy-daughter date night. It could be, writing a true north principle once a week in a book and talking about it. It could be, prayers at night with your kids. Just add one thing. Yeah. And then next year, add another thing, I feel like sometimes people are overwhelmed by it. I get overwhelmed by am I not doing a good enough job of what else could I do better? And there's 1,000 things you could do, but I think if you can do one or two things purposeful.
Well, that's what's great about this podcast is that it inspires new ideas all the time. So every guest you guys have on, there's something, even if it's just one thing, I'm going to try that.
Yes.
Well, you guys publishing a podcast, it's like, I can always be inspired by something.
We call them little golden nuggets we get out of each podcast. So what are some other things you've done that are in that space of, we did some of these things on purpose, or we didn't do it on purpose, but it was awesome. So
this was a happy accident.
Yeah.
Well, I think I had a daughter, Mia, who was really, really hard to work with. She's very independent. When she was like a little girl, like 6, 7, just super independent, defiant. We put her in Taekwondo. And Master Markham would teach them respect for your parents. And at the end of every practice, he would have them turn and bow to their parents and say, and express gratitude. And I was like, man, this Master Markham is the bomb. The longer I can keep me in here, the better, right? But I kind of reflected on like how we find ourselves in the positions we are in life. And I said, someone doesn't wake up one morning and go, oh, I've got a black belt in Taekwondo. How did that happen? But here you'd hear this. I'm a 15 years old girl. How did I get pregnant? How did that happen? I said, there are steps you have to take to get to where you're going. Where do you want to go? And what steps do you take? And so I actually sat my girls down when they were young, and I said, I want you guys to be able to have a great college life. I want you to have fun dating. I want you, this is a full, rich life. You can have all these experiences. But if you have a baby when you're 15, 16, 17, a lot of that goes away. And so in order for you to eliminate that risk, you have to understand the steps that get you there. And I full on said, okay, sex, that's the final step. What's the step before that? You know, touching all over, major makeout. Okay, what's the step before that? What's the step before that? All the way down to like holding hands, right? And I said, if you take a step too quick, you can never go back because it's impossible to just go back. I'm just going to hold hands now. It ain't going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I said, when do you want to get married and have kids? Oh, at 22, 24, whatever they said, right? And I go, all right. So how long do you kiss and touch before that? How many years do you think you can last before having sex? So
it's not going to be long.
No, it's not going to be days. It's going to be minutes.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I go, okay, so that step has to be probably really close to when you want to have sex.
This is a really good discussion.
And then what's the step before that? Okay, laying down, making out. The step between that and the next one is probably really close too. So we need to make sure that timing of that step is appropriate at the right time. Each one of these steps is closer and closer together as you get further. Because you can hold hands for
years.
Yep. And you can do a peck on the cheek or a peck on the lips for years. But the steps get closer and closer to closer, the more intimate you get. So if you're making out when you're 14 years old, can you see where these steps will lead you? And so one of the things that we would do, and I actually had this conversation with their friends one time. And I said, because one of the mantras I would use when they would go out, remember the steps. Remember the steps. Have a great
awesome.
Night. So it's like
they knew exactly what the whole conversation came back into their head.
Oh yeah. Were they perfect? No, my girls didn't. They weren't perfect. They made their mistakes and stuff. But I feel like I couldn't be okay with myself as a father if I didn't try to teach them and let them know what my dad never had that conversation with me. My mom never had that conversation with me. That's kind of a weird conversation to have. But man, how valuable would it be for you to sit down and say, hey, look, I want you to have sex. I want you to have a fantastic relationship, but the timing is so critical.
Yeah, I love that. There's a golden nugget right there for me.
Yeah,
I'm
drop
a short
nuggets.
conversation.
Well, it's when do you want the awkward moment?
Yeah.
Right?
Do you
want the awkward moment when you're talking about it, or do you want the awkward moment when she says, I'm pregnant?
Right.
Like,
exactly.
It's going to be awkward for everybody at some point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when do you want to be awkward about
Well,
it?
now people do this have, Ernie talk to him about it on the podcast.
Yeah.
That'll be like
His email is
Hey, sweetheart, come here. Listen to this podcast.
Listen to this podcast. Do you see what he's saying?
well, and I like the way you put it though, because, I've had some of these conversations with my kids because I have 3 teenagers, and you have to have some of these conversations as they start hanging out with the opposite sex. But I like the way you put it through steps, and those steps get closer and closer the more intimate you get. And I think that everybody thinks that they're just like steel strong.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And this is just fine. This is normal. Everybody's doing it. Mm-hmm. So I'd be fine if I just did it too.
Yeah.
But
they always say, how did this happen?
Yeah.
Like, no, you took the steps. You took the steps to get there. Of course you know how it happened. Maybe somebody didn't explain to you how the steps worked.
Right. Well, it's so logical. That's what I love about how you explained it. It's just very logical, and you could apply it to other things. You could say, eventually you want to have sex.
Yeah.
You don't ever want to do drugs.
Right.
You ruin your whole life. Worse than sex.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And so just taking that exact same discussion and saying, okay, let's walk through the steps to that.
Yeah.
Hanging out with the wrong friends is probably a step, right? That are doing things you shouldn't. And alcohol is probably a step, and smoking marijuana is probably a step.
Try a little vaping,
And maybe vaping's
But
in
it doesn't have nicotine in it, so it's okay.
So it's
like,
okay.
Well, that's a
And,
step.
well, those are all steps towards that same type of problem, right? So I can see now, because Ernie was on the podcast, I can have like all these step conversations with the kids. And to me, it's extremely logical, which I love about it, right? It's not an emotional discussion.
Right.
It makes sense. It will make sense to a teenager. They're smart enough to really understand that. And they're going to ask themselves, if you have that early in their teenage life, they're going to ask themselves, am I taking one of the steps my dad talked to me about? Yeah. You couldn't not ask yourself that.
Right.
It's beautiful. I love it. Thank you for sharing it.
I think what's crazy is that we as providers, we think about steps all the time in business. I mean,
totally.
Anybody who's
plan
an
out the
entrepreneur,
steps.
oh, absolutely. It's like anybody that's in business, even if you're working for somebody, you still have to develop a plan to get you there. Right?
I'm laughing because you're sitting in front of a 12-foot whiteboard that has a whole plan on it that says beginning, and then the end says start, end, right? And there's like 20 steps in between. It's like we do it all the time. Right?
But we don't do it for the most important parts of our life.
For the most important part. Yeah. You know what? The other thing I'd like to add to that is we should be doing that in the positive direction also, right? Because in business, we're constantly talking about vision, right? Mm-hmm. I always tell my teams, hey, this is the mountain we want to climb. Now let's figure out how the steps that we need to take in order to climb that mountain, right? And I think talking to our kids about who do you want to become? Not only what do you want to do for a living, or, what do you want to accomplish, but who do you want to become? What do you think the steps are to becoming that person? That's another great conversation to have with your kids and make it more logical, right? I just love the way you put that.
The way you said that too, it matters. The words that you use matters. How do you want to climb this mountain is different than how do you not fall in that sinkhole?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because it's framed positively. And they say, this is what I want to become, not what I don't want to happen to me.
Right. And
so,
if you're so busy doing what you should be doing, you don't have time to do what you're not supposed to be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But it's more aspirational instead of like living in fear. Like, oh, I don't want that to happen to me. Like,
you know what though? What's frustrating to me is that our personal life, our business successes are almost private. Like, what I say that is, if I'm successful, if I talk about my success, I'm arrogant, right? But how can I model that for somebody else if it's secret? How often do we need to mentor other people? Like, here, it drives me nuts. Kids will go through college and get a degree in something they hate. I'm like, why do we do that? It's because, first of all, the kids don't think they can actually shadow somebody or talk to somebody in a career that they're interested in. So they blindly go into this, I think I'd be a really good teacher. Okay. Have you ever taught before? Well, no, I liked my second grade teacher and I want to be just like her. Well, why don't you go teach or kind of shadow a teacher for a few days? Not just on a highlight day.
Instead of spending 4 years.
Exactly.
And then realizing I don't like teaching.
Or and so I have an obligation. If anybody ever calls me and says, hey, I'm really interested in what you do, I need to give them 100% of my attention and time. There's this one guy, Jonah Moreno. Jonah is a total rock star kid. Good friends with one of my older daughter. And he's like, hey, I really like what you do. This is like a few years ago. Can I come talk to you about that? Anytime he wanted to talk, I'm talking to him because he was like, I'm just trying to navigate my way through a career choice. And I want to know what you do and how you do it. And I mean, I think your computer setup is super cool. Now, but that has nothing to do with what I do.
Right.
It just looks cool. Right. And so we need to take the time to be mentors to anybody who calls up and says, hey, Cory, I want to be a CEO someday. What's that like? We have to say, look, there's nothing more important than the future. And let's sit down and talk.
Yeah.
Let's grab some lunch together. And man, I tell you what, how cool would that be to have this 18-year-old kid be in your office and go, I'm a freaking big D CEO right here, man. And he's giving me the time of day. He's going to go, I want to be just like Cory. I want to be just like him when I grow up.
Don't you think most successful executives or business owners, whatever you want to call it, if a young person is asking for that kind of time, you're going to give it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, most people would give it. I think kids would be surprised how often people would give it, because they're really in that space of, who do I want to be? Who do I want to become? What do I want to do in my life? Right. And in fact, that's easier time to give than someone who, is already in the business,
right?
And
who wants to sell you something,
or there might be some kind of ulterior motive. Not that we shouldn't be mentoring and helping each other, even if we're in the same business, no doubt, but it's just easier to say yes. And you just want to say yes to those kids. Don't you think?
So if you're a kid listening,
yes,
if you're a kid listening to this program, if you're a teenager, you're wondering what to do for a living, think about the people in your life that you respect, that you like what they do, that you're passionate about what they do, and reach out to those people, because odds are likely they will say, yeah, let's do this. Come on in, and you will find yourself in cool places talking to cool people.
There's a little voice in your head right now. Okay. If you're a young person, there's a little voice in your head saying, they're not going to want to talk to me. Okay. That is the darkest voice in the universe trying to make you a failure. And it is lying to you. That voice saying, oh, he's too busy. No. If you ever call and ask to meet with somebody because you're interested in mentorship or some kind of insight or to be inspired by them, and they say no, you did not want to talk to them in the first place.
They're the
don't
wrong
worry.
person.
Yeah, there are thousands of others that would say yes.
Totally.
So if you got really unlucky and got someone to say, hey, look, I'm too busy, kid, it's like, you don't want to talk to them anyway.
Yeah. That's not the
And I would say shoot for the skies too.
Yeah.
Like, if you're looking for a mentor, especially at that age where, they're not asking, most of these kids aren't asking for, hey, can I shadow you for 6 months? I mean, we're talking a day or two, right?
Yeah.
Shoot for the moon. Like, would be the ultimate person that you could sit down with? And the worst that can happen is they say they don't have time, or I don't, whatever. And then I think what you said is a good question to ask them. And that is, well, what are the steps?
Yeah. Oh,
like, if I want to become you or someone like you or in your industry, talk to me about the steps. Tell me how I'm going to climb that mountain. Tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly in addition, right? Like, what do you love about your job? What's hard about your job? Just ask them those questions, right?
Yeah. So I want to illustrate this with Ernie, because I know this about Ernie.
Okay.
At some point in your life, there was a conversation with somebody else that said, how could we get Chuck Norris to be part of our brand? Right? Chuck Norris.
I know.
Right? So, and you go, I don't know if Chuck Norris would really want to talk to a convenience store brand, right?
Oh
but
gosh.
Tell us how this happens, because Ernie and Chuck are buds.
We're buds. Yep. His name's Carlos, by the way. His name's not Chuck. That's
Carlos. That's a good thing to know.
Yeah.
There's your,
in case I ever meet Chuck someday.
There's another Carlos. Golden nugget on the
Gentleman Do you call him Chuck or do you call him Carlos?
It depends on the situation.
Okay.
Yeah. So Chuck is the persona. Chuck is the movie star. Chuck is that. Yeah. So we'll, in fact, in conversations with him, we'll say, let's have Chuck as if he was a different person. Let's have Chuck do this. Let's have Chuck do that. But like,
when you're talking to him,
when I send Gina a text. So Gina's his wife. Carlos does not get on the phone much. So it's like, and Gina is like a rock star too. I mean, she is brains. She's not only gorgeous, she's incredibly smart and incredibly driven.
Cool.
Carlos is lucky to have her for sure. So I'd send her a text, say, hey, how are you and Carlos doing? Miss you guys. I'm sure you guys are in Hawaii right now because it's Christmas time and that's what they'd like to do. And she'll send a text back and she's like all sweet. But I'll tell you how we became friends. Okay.
Yeah. Give us the story.
Okay. So, and I think that's a great segue because when the idea came up to partner with Chuck Norris, my initial reaction was, there is no way. He's just unreachable. At Maverick, we'd come up with sweepstakes prizes that were super, super inspirational, aspirational, like really cool. Not a washer and dryer, because most people would want a washer and dryer, but it'd be like a Bad A truck. So we came, I think it was Kristen Green who came up with this idea. She was a creative, like my right-hand girl at Maverick. And most of her ideas were just solid gold. And when we were brainstorming, she came up with this idea. What if we called it Chuck Norris, the ultimate dude vehicle? Chuck Norris, right? And I said, we're going to get sued. There's no doubt. If we do something big around Chuck Norris, we'll get sued. So we had our media buyer try to reach out to Chuck Norris's people, and it took forever. So we had to do a different campaign that year. But that fall, I actually got a call in my office from Gina Norris. And Gina said, hey, we were approached to do some kind of a partnership with you. Can you explain it to me? So I said, yeah, we've got this. I'm like all nervous and stuff. I'm talking to Gina Norris, right? And I said, well, we got this idea to create a really cool truck. Have the Diesel brothers on, they have a TV show. They're going to build this truck for us. And we want it to be the baddest, coolest, toughest truck in the world. And we want to call it Chuck Norris. So we want your permission to be able to name it Chuck Norris. And she said, well, we said no to our agent, but I'm really interested in talking to you about it. I said, so why? She said, well, 8 months ago, Carlos and I were drilling for water to irrigate our fields in Navasota, Texas. And we hit an aquifer that's got this perfect, clear, drinkable water. We had it tested. It's super pure. And we decided we were going to build a water bottling plant across the street from our home by our field so that we could bottle and sell this water. We're calling it C-Force water, but we have no one to retail it yet, nowhere to sell it. So
I happen to have a place.
Yeah. She said, if you're willing to, if Maverick will sell our water, then we will partner with you. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a dream come true. So I go down to our water buyer, our packaged beverage buyer, and say, look, this is worth $600,000 in media. Can you see if there's a place on our shelf to carry C-Force water? And he was really cool. He said, yeah, I'm really not excited about selling more water because if you're not the top 2 brands, you're just not selling any water. And it's just a waste of time. He says, well, we can get marketing value from it. And anyway, so we put together a contract. Things were going great, but we needed to have him come up and shoot some video with us.
Yeah.
We had Chuck Norris. The truck was finished. We wanted Chuck Norris to come up. And my first engagement with him, because I'd been calling and talking to Gina this whole time, right? They needed somebody to drive them around. And they had their full-on bodyguards, with their own vehicles and stuff. And
Chuck Norris doesn't need a bodyguard.
Exactly. Totally. The bodyguards
need Chuck Norris.
Yeah. So, but anyway, this is a really long story, but I was their driver, and Gina didn't know that I was the one they thought I was just some driver. But they were so sweet to me. They were so kind to me. And like 10 minutes later, they go, wait a second. You're the guy that's running Mavericks marketing. I go, yeah. They were like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. We didn't introduce ourselves. I'm like, well, it's totally cool. And I got to see who you really were.
Yeah.
Because I could have been just some schmo driver dude, right?
Right.
And so tons of respect for these two people.
Cool.
But best story is we decided to do a video down in Navasota at the ranch. So we were shooting video all day long. And then after shooting video, Chuck says, hey, I'm going to go work out. Want to work out with me?
Yeah.
Hello. So we go work out. And this dude, guys, he was 70 something years old at the time. He worked me under the table, and I work out every day. He is like, he wasn't lifting heavy. They had this big machine with all the cable systems and stuff. And he would just do like, what I would typically do is like 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of maybe 12 if I'm really pushing it. He was doing like 3 sets of 40. And so just complete burnout. And I was like, at the end of this workout, I am like shaking. I was a wreck. And I'm like, I was lifting the same weight he was. So I'm like, holy crap, this guy is bad.
He's legit.
He is legit. Totally legit. I told Gina we were going to have dinner that night together. So me, my boss, Aaron Simpson, a couple of guys from the film crew guys were there. And they invite us over to the house, the main house, to have dinner. I said, I'm going to bake bread. Can you? So Gina had one of her helpers drop off all these ingredients for bread. And I made bread after the workout.
I'm assuming that's some kind of common occurrence in your life.
Oh, dude, I'm a bread man.
You're a bread guy.
Totally bread guy. I love bread. So I make bread. We go over. She's making meatloaf. Gina's making meatloaf. So I'm sitting right next, like Kirk is right here to my left. And this is where Carlos was, right? So we're eating meatloaf and bread and just talking and stuff. And so Carlos turns to me. We're just wrapping up dinner. He says, hey, what do you want to do now? I go, okay, this sounds really cheesy, but if I could watch a Chuck Norris movie with Chuck Norris, it'd be like a dream come true. And he slaps the table, let's do it. And so like 10 minutes later, Chuck Norris and I and my boss and Gina and the rest of the crew, I'm sitting right next to Chuck. We got this big, in his movie home theater, I'm on a lazy boy. I've got a big piece of apple pie with ice cream on it. And I'm practically holding hands with Chuck Norris. And we're watching the opening credits go. And I'm seriously, guys, I'm almost crying. It was like this
So
surreal
surreal
moment. I'm like, how did this happen? And I think it all happened kind of come back circle that I had, at least we'll give it a shot. Because I could have easily said, guys, let's not do it. Let's move on. Yeah. This is going to be too much work.
Just said waste of time.
Yeah, this is a waste of time. And yet it turned out to be one of the biggest, coolest campaigns we ever did, because we ended up getting Chuck Norris to come up afterwards during the campaign and visit like 6 stores.
Oh, wow.
And do a tour that we didn't have to pay for because he was promoting his water at the time. I'm like, it was golden, but it wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have said, well, let's give it a shot.
So the kids listening out there, or parents talking to their kids,
or high school marketing classes or college marketing classes, right? Like if you're teaching one of those classes, you're going to want to hear this story.
Yeah. That's why I say shoot for the stars, and if you don't get there, what's the worst that can happen, as they say now?
Yeah. I get scared.
That's the worst
still.
that can happen.
I still get, it's weird. You. It's like, I still get scared. Like I love this idea of like, in the back of my mind, I still want to be that Disney animator guy. Are they really going to, I'm a 51-year-old dude.
Yeah, but you look really 32, so you have that going for you.
I got it.
You just show them a picture. You're good.
Yeah, right.
Well, do it. You should do it.
I know. I should
be
a lesson, a follow-up lesson with.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so did you go and visit with anybody at Disney? I'm like, oh crap, you guys, they're not going to give me the time of day. And here I am preaching. You guys reach for the stars.
Well, Ernie really is that talented. So if you've ever been to a Maverick, we have a lot of people that listen to the podcast that will know what Maverick is. All the artwork inside, outside on the pumps and on the walls, and like this place, you walk in, guess who drew it? Yeah, that's Ernie.
I did the original ones, and then I had other people help me and stuff, but it's not all me. Which one, that like Nate Healy, Sean Mitchell, there's other illustrators that are phenomenal that helped.
But I love it because the first time I met Ernie, I was like, what do you do for a living? He's like, well, I'm at Maverick. And I was like, I recognized his voice. I go to Maverick and fill up so much that I was like, will you say something? Right. Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah,
we went to a Real Salt Lake game together.
So what did you say? I want to hear this voice.
Step inside for a Bahama Mama or something like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Ernie's voice.
It was your voice?
Yeah. So it's inexpensive to use my voice.
There you go.
Versus hiring out. So we built a sound studio at the new Maverick headquarters. And so when we did radio spots, at first I was I was doing all the voice. But then it was like, man, I've got like 12 guys or 12 people. And so I'd give people turns. Hey, you guys, hey, would you come in and do this voiceover experience with guys?
That's way cool.
We're needing to wrap up soon.
Dang it.
Unfortunately. I know. How does 43 minutes go by that?
I don't know. We need part two.
I know we do.
I'm all for part two.
Okay.
Well, part two will be, Ernie, what was it like to contact someone at Disney? And I'll let you know.
Here's what we're going to do.
Crap, I just held myself accountable.
We're going to have a fourth seat with Chuck Norris.
Okay.
Yeah, if Chuck comes back into town, and you know what though, like he's seriously like every person I've ever met that's had any interaction with him, that dude is a gentleman.
Yeah, he is. He really is.
Like he treats everybody with respect.
Yeah.
I have other friends who have had first person interactions with Carlos.
He's a sweetheart.
And so cool. If that ever presents itself, if he's in Salt Lake and would love to talk about it, let's make it happen. I'd love that. Well, Ernie, we end every podcast by asking our guests what they think it means to be a gentleman. You've had a little bit of time to think about that since you've been listening to the podcast now for a couple of years. How would you answer that question?
I think the biggest thing is to not be reactive. I think when I think of a gentleman, I think of someone who has a lot of self-control, that is deliberate about the way they communicate. We live in a world that kind of celebrates and glamorizes reactive, like someone who's angry and seeing them react, or a social media post. Oh, you've made me angry, so I'm going to be vindictive back. In traffic, if you live in a state that has traffic, it is so natural to be an a-hole when someone else is an a-hole to you, cuts you off or whatever. And I think being a gentleman is being very deliberate about how I'm going to react. I will not let anger drive me. I'm going to show kindness and always assume good intent and show love wherever possible, because to me that shows self-mastery that is a peculiar attribute to a gentleman.
There you go. Never been said before that way.
Never been said. I love it.
Self-mastery is the peculiar attribute of a gentleman. I love it. Ernie, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's so part two is after you've landed a gig at Disney. And if people want to connect with you, so Ernie is an amazing artist. He's got his book. Tell him the website, because he also will teach you or your kids how to draw.
Yeah. So you can reach me at earnburn.com. It's ERNBURN. earnburn.com. That's a nickname my twin brother gave me when I was little, and it's stuck. So earnburn.com. And if you want to draw stuff with a crazy version of me, my alter ego, I know Sketchy. His name's Sketchy, the way Peter Parker knows Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So you can go to sketch-e.com or just search up sketch-e on YouTube.
That's your alter ego teaching kids how to draw, right?
Yeah. And it's super fun and it's crazy.
That's awesome.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for joining us today. We had a great time talking to Ernie Harker today. If you want to connect with him, please do. If you want to connect with us, please send us an email at info@thegentlemanproject.com. Connect with us on your social media and on any podcast platform where podcasts are available. You can find us, and we'd love it if you'd share, like, rate, and review us. It's always helpful for us to reach a bigger audience. So thank you very much. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore. Go out there and teach your kids the steps. Thanks, everyone.